Alrighty. I wanted to. I hadn't did this in a while, so I figured I'd go live this Sunday morning and talk about commercial recording studios closing. Um, I'm the reason I'm want to talk about this, um, and it's simply because I was watching a video with Rick Beato, and that's basically about recording studio jobs. But basically, it was like all these recording studio jobs are going away simply because recording studios on the commercial side are shrinking, and it's that's actually true. Like I would have never thought Capitol Studios was shut down, but I believe even Capitol Studios have went ahead and start laying people off. So welcome, Born Shamir. Just talking about commercial recording studios closing. Um, the reason being that I want to talk about commercial studios closing simply because I believe now it's 2025, and believe it or not, it's just that we're able to do this at home now. Majority. There are always going to be people that feel that a commercial studio is is needed, and will not. I'm not going to say that you don't need commercial studios. I mixed up. That's an interesting title. I mixed up. That's cool. I like that. Well, anyhow, welcome. I'm just talking about commercial recording studios. I think that I don't think every single commercial is going to go away because there's always going to be people that's going to want to go to a commercial studio to record, especially bands or orchestras, simply because you're just not getting the room in your house. You'd have to have some serious money to convert your home to be able to record bands. So welcome, A Banks. Just doing this live stream. I haven't did it in a couple of while. So, but anyhow, just talk, like I said, I'm just talking about commercial recording studios. I think that it's caught up to be able to do this at home. And the reason being, I don't think you have to have the big budget to do a commercial recording studio setup like you had to 30, 40 years ago. You had to do that because that was the only way we could record music. You had to have that large console. You had to have a tape machine. You had to have all the outboard gear processing. Uh, you had to have all that. So I'm just see what's good. Thumbs up. Let's have it at that free like. But yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it. So I wanted to say that I think now that with DAWs, plugins are an alternative, to outboard gear. Some people feel that there's always the outboard gear versus plugins. I think plugins are not necessarily, there's always which is better, outboard gear or plugins or whatever the case. I don't think plugins is I don't think people are making plugins to be better than outboard gear. I think they're just making plugins as an alternative to outboard gear. And because plugins are an alternative to outboard gear, that makes it easy because we can definitely afford plugins over outboard gear. So I think that with that being said, with people being able to buy a DAW, no matter what, Pro Tools, Logic, Studio One, whatever, Ableton Live, plugins, an interface. Now the skill set it's still something that people are going to have to learn as far as recording, mixing, mastering, how to use the tools, how to use an EQ, how to use a compressor, whether you use a real compressor or a plug-in compressor, you still got to know how to use a compressor. That's not going away. But it's gotten to the point now you can even just use preamps in an audio interface. There are always going to be people that say, no, you're not going to get, the same level. But you got to remember a lot of times the people that are saying this are the people that are into specific types of genre music that, that to give it that sound, yes, a console, preamps, outboard gear, microphones. If you're recording in certain styles of music, yes, to get that sonic sound, yes. But if you're doing an hip hop, electronic, EDM, trap, popular music, pop music, whatever case, using electronic instruments, VST instruments, whatever, you just don't need it. You can get away with just using. You can do everything within like Reason Studio. A lot of the DAWs have gotten that good. That's how I look at it. So I'm gonna let y'all chime. I'm not gonna go too much on that, but I'm gonna let people chime in on their thoughts. As more and more people tune in, would you, are you more inspired to still want to go to commercial studio, or are you like me who decided to build their own home recording studio and say, well, I'm good doing this at home? I like to hear everyone's thoughts on that. Like me, I'm good at because I'm pretty much getting the same results. Now, the only thing I'm just going to sit there and say with commercial recording studios is that when you went to a commercial recording studio, one of the things was there were always other artists that recorded at that recording studio. So that might be inspirational to some people, to go to a recording studio where your favorite artist may have recorded at, and that might be the incentive to go. Now, as far as some recording studios, like, if I go to East West and they're saying someone like, well, Nat King Cole or Frank Sinatra recorded here. And I'm like, yeah, that's nice, but I don't listen to Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra's not my era. Frank Sinatra is 60s. Frank Sinatra was singing before I was born. 50s and 60s. That's not my era. My era music is, 70s, 80s, 90s. So I'm more likely to be more inspired if I heard like for example, some of the R&B artists that I listen to. That may give me a little bit of inspiration. But there are so many recording studios that were recorded in the 90s with some of these groups that have already closed. We always hear about the most popular ones, like the Record Plant, the Hit Factory, Electric Lady, but there were literally thousands of more that had already started closing, like the Magic Shop in New York that closed years ago, and you'd be amazed some of the big artists that recorded at the Magic Shop. So, just getting everyone's thoughts on that. And the reason why, like I said, I was inspired to talk about this in the title was because I saw Rick Beato where he was talking about recording studios closing. I believe Ocean Way, which is United, they're closed. The Record Plant closed. Capitol's closing. So what as people get their thoughts, what do you think? Also, as we get more people chime in to give their thoughts, I think another thing that makes it more appealing for people that do this at home, because you don't have to buy for example, a Universal Audio 1176 compressor anymore. The clone companies have proven that you don't. Like, you can get the Warm Audio, or like me, I have the Lindale Audio 76s in my rack. That's as good as the Universal Audio for nowhere near. I think a lot of that gear is because of its name. So they're going to charge top dollar for it simply because that's the name of the ubiquitous gear that was known in all these recording studios. For example, yes, an Teletronix LA2A is supposed to be, a top bass and vocal recording compressor, right? Just like with the 670 Fairchild, those are, but it's kind of like there's so many clones, and like, why would I need to? My replicas get the job done just as good. It's just like I don't have to spend that kind of money. So I think that's another appealing factor for people to give them the incentive to do this at home, because I can afford replica gear, warm audio or stem audio, and not spend that kind of money. Let's see. Welcome Vigilante and Tactical MIDI. Y'all probably been listening to the conversation, and like I said, Vigilante says these studios are closing, not just because you can do it at home, but for cheaper, but it's less money in music. That is the number one. If you look at the big picture, that is really the big goal, because really commercial studios catered toward recording artists that had record contracts, that had got advanced budgets, that could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in those recording studios. That was the reason why, but they're not getting that anymore. And that was the justification for like SSL to charge $750,000 for like an SSL 4000 32 channel console, as an example, because they knew they were going to keep getting contracts, recording artists was in there 24/7 a day. They would book the studio for weeks to months on the end, bringing all kinds of session musicians to do all that. Even the recording artists in the business today, the budget isn't like that. So that is a very good analogy, because that is really the heart of it. So I'll text you. It's been a while. Yeah, I have. I hadn't done this in a minute. So how does someone market music and make it a profitable nowadays? The only way people can really, and I was looking at this, I thought about this too. I think the only way people are making any profit is through ticket sale, through concert shows. If you think about it, think about some of the artists that are still touring and that's been in the game for a while. Mary J. Blige or Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake or whatever. Think about how they are touring now, and the ticket sales to go to, like, for example, Nashville, is Bridgestone Arena, right? So depending on your seating, the tickets can range anywhere from $50, $25, $50, $100, up to $1,000, $1,500, whatever. So that's the thing. That's the money for most artists, especially if you did. And that's just Nashville. What about Atlanta? What about Detroit? What about New York and LA and Chicago and Miami and Dallas and Oklahoma City, Hawaii, and then overseas. So that is where artists can make their profit, but minus there's always going to be still expenses, because you got the travel, the hotel, the sound crew, traveling, and all that. But that's where they're making the bulk of their money, and that's where artists have always made the bulk of their money. Artists themselves have never made it money through the record label, through record sales, because record labels were taking 80%. They would give the artist 3 or 4 points. So they never really made that kind of money the old way. So the only one that really suffered in the music industry is record labels. Unless artists had to really negotiate and redo their contracts and really get a bigger part. Like someone like Prince or Michael Jackson can really negotiate, because they knew Michael Jackson was going to sell out 100,000 people concert arenas. So he had that leverage. But you have, like, believe it or not, Boyz II Men didn't even have the leverage like Michael Jackson did. Yeah, Born Swift said the industry of music seems to be on the dead, yet the business of music is on the treadmill. And really, you know who's really making the most money right now? Plug-in companies, clone companies, gear, people that make gear, because everyone's buying gear to do this at home. So that's booming. Other than concert sales, you know, for the artists, but the record labels, you know, they're not making any money. They just because. So it really, you know, it really depends. So, but yeah, that's that kind of, you know, you think about it, you can afford gear now. You can afford interfaces. You can afford monitors. You know, no one says you have to buy a fit, you know, I don't know, Telefunken 251 $10,000 microphone anymore. You know, you could buy a Warm Audio 251 for like $800 and pretty much get practically the same results. So that's generally. So I think the commercial studio, there's still gonna be commercial studios, but it's not gonna be in the hundreds. It's not gonna be in the thousands like it used to be. It probably would be maybe, you know, like LA. I think LA was averaging about 500 or 600 recordings, commercial recording studios. That's probably going to drop down to about 50. You know, I think that's going to, because they're still going to do movie scores, and they're still going to hire actual musicians to do that. Even though they swerving down, AI is coming up real fast, but there's some things that just going to require actual real human to do that you just can't replace with AI. So, but I like I said, for the music profit, I think is mostly the concert sales, you know, and gear. What else? So say music is more profitable than ever, but it's not in album sales. I don't know about that, because I'm like, I don't know. I have to disagree with that. I think music, is profitable for like companies like Warm Audio, but I don't see it being profitable for artists or producers. You know, unless the artist, you know, unless an artist becomes, because, you know, one, you got to look at the traditional way. Look at the traditional way artists made their money. Well, most artists made their money. Most of the time was through touring. Oh, you said I didn't say it was profitable, or just I said, yeah. I mean, like I said, music. Mostly, like I said, like the clone companies, as an example, because the clone companies are doing well because now you can afford vintage, high-end type of gear without spending that money. In other words, I don't have to buy an actual Fairchild 670, which is going to run you about $30,000 if you can get your hand on one. I can get an unfairchild for $2,000 or whatever, instead of $30,000. I think that's what's making it more profitable for like the companies making, because everyone's buying gear because everyone's doing this at home. So because everyone's doing this at home, including myself, it's easier. And then also you have like Reverb, where people can buy gear on Reverb, like used gear. You know, it was eBay, but Reverb, you know, and places like that. So, man, okay, let me see. Welcome, Maddie Two Hats. Vince says I have a Warm 251. Yeah, those are good. Like I said, Sylvia Massey had did a studio session using Warm Audio microphones. And there's Warm Audios. So does Joe Correa from Treasure Owl Recording Studios. He uses a lot of Warm Audio microphones. So James says, can you hook a MPC Live to in standalone mod without USB cable? I don't know. I don't have an MPC Live, so I would not know. No. I do have older MPCs. I have the MPC Renaissance, which I'm using the MPC Studio software. And of course, it's by Studio. And I also have an MPC Studio downstairs. So it works flawlessly. So I had no needs. I didn't really see a need to upgrade my MPC. I'm just not, some people are, get the latest MPC gear, but not for what I do. Man Never says, having a studio that I'm a studio and producer, and I make a killer living. I have 2 runaway people because I don't have the time to record everyone. What's the name of your studio? Where are you located at? So Vigilante says, I'm in the process of releasing music over the next few days, but I don't expect to see a dime back. I'll be lucky if any. Like I said, it's hit or miss. There are people that are taking their money. They're doing, like distribution, like with 1RPM or CD Baby or different distribution outlets. There's DistroKid, all these, and so forth. And those distribution companies are putting your stuff on like iTunes. They're doing iTunes. They're doing what's the other one? Apple Music, Google Play. They're getting them on Spotify and XM Sirius Radio and stuff like that. But so I think it's going to be hit or miss because it's a matter of now you have to work harder and harder to build an audience. Because for example, if I'm an artist and I try to load something on like SoundCloud, I have a better chance of building a bigger audience, releasing my music, and maybe even doing a video on YouTube to get more people and then direct them to SoundCloud and Reverb Nation that way than just to put something on SoundCloud. Because it's kind of like going to SoundCloud. If you don't know of a certain artist, you're not going to know to go look for that person because you don't know who it is to go look for that person, if that makes sense. So, man, you said Nashville, Chicago. I got your email. I can send you okay. Just send it to me. Especially Nashville, because I go to Nashville all the time. Matter of fact, I'm going to Nashville tomorrow. So, just send it to my email. Now, let me see, Mr. Shutter, what do you think about Dolby Atmos? I don't think it's ready for the home. I don't, I got a friend. He's been working with Dolby Atmos. Which is cool to really, because you think about it, it's really like, I think it's like stereo recording mixing on steroids, because you got all these speakers, certain things that come out of certain speakers to give this, this effect. But I don't, when we're listening to music in our cars, on our earbuds, on our, on our speakers, and it's just 2 speakers. Most people listen to stuff with just 2 speakers, a left and a right. So to really get the experience of, have what, with the Atmos, I'm thinking you have an 8 speaker system with a sub and, speakers to front, to the side, or however Atmos is placed. I think that's the only way you're going to really get the effect of that. I don't see people, because most of the time, what do we listen to? Most of our music is recorded. It's stereo. You got stuff coming left and right. So I don't know. Atmos is it might be a while, but I don't know what to make of Atmos yet. I just don't. Born Schmidt said, "Newsflash, bro. SoundCloud have been AI learning all our posted songs." Yeah, I believe it. I definitely believe it. They got to the point now where AI is not, you can't even tell it's AI anymore, especially on vocal recording. And, AI it's becoming a threat to the human, the human aspect. If you got a human record, mixing engineer, mastering engineer, and, people just creating music, whatever, it's becoming a threat. But I'm really curious to see where AI goes, because I think in the end, how are you going to interact with AI, especially live in a concert? Because AI is not human. So unless they're going to put a big gigantic screen, or have some sort of laser imaging. But other than that, I'm talking about an actual real human you can physically touch and shake hands and, go to the after party and all that. That ain't happening with AI. You need real humans for that. So Matthew says, I got a home studio, but I'm going to a bigger recording studio on Monday to track through some analog. Okay. Let's see. He also think AI is going to take over all the composers before too long, I think, for film. That's where, I was thinking about holographic images. Okay. I was thinking about, you think about it, other than you think about if they can create AI actors, these not real actors. You think about an AI, which is, basic graphic imaging, right? I don't have to hire stunt doubles. I don't have to worry about all this. If I was, making a movie, you don't have to worry about green screens and blue screens, and you can basically generate a scene. It can even create the vocals, the music. I mean, really, it's gotten to the point where you can even watch, even the gaming looks realistic now. So I think that's who really going to be worried about their jobs, is the movie industry. Because if you get AI to start creating all these scenes that take a lot of, props and actors and stunts, and they can do with AI. You watch a whole movie that was AI generated, you think about how many jobs will get lost. Excuse me. Simply because a computer did all the work, So it's gonna be interesting. City watermarking our works is the future. Watermarking. Okay. Spectrum imaging. Okay. So going back to what I was saying about so like I said, I think the commercial business, I think there's still going to be commercial, because there's going to be still lots of people that's still going to go to commercial studio. And that's going to be good for the commercial studio, because really, ideally, commercial studios, they're in existence really technically to make money for the most part. A lot of people enjoy recording artists, and recording artists and love to see the artists create and be in the recording process and all that. But really, technically, the recording studio's number one purpose is to record. That's why they're open to the public, right? So I think there's still going to be recording studios, but like I was saying, like, for example, LA having 500 commercial studios, it won't be like that. It's going to be, you might have 50 in LA, maybe 10 or 15 in, 20 in New York. Maybe now Nashville, because of the Nashville has about 200 recording studios. They stay pretty busy, but that's just because how the country and western artists like to record in Nashville. So as long as they keep that going, Nashville recording studios are going to stay pretty busy. But I think a lot of the ones that we are known, like the Hit Factory, it wouldn't shock me like the Hit Factory out of Miami. Eventually, even though they had #1 artists that recorded there, but a lot of those artists that used to record there aren't recording anymore. Some of these artists have passed away, moved on. So it's almost like you're living on a legacy of the past. But a lot of people just aren't, because those type of studios like the Hit Factory, you really can't afford to charge $500 an hour like they used to anymore, because people just don't have that kind of money. Even the artists that are on record labels today, they just don't get advances like no more. They're no more long. They don't get the record deal contracts are different. So like I said today, I just want to keep a light conversation on people's thoughts of the commercial recording studio. For me personally, I like commercial recording studios because of the atmosphere. But also at the same time, I am very comfortable being able to just be in my own recording studio in my house, because I like being able to walk up here. I don't have to book my own recording studio. I can just come up here and I'm in here. I don't have to worry about booking time. And if it's 3:00 in the morning and I want to come up here and record some tracks, I can do that. That's the great thing about having your own home recording studio. And I think that's what it is. I think everyone's they're loving the convenience of owning their own recording studio. So Mr. Showtime says a lot of major artists building their, and they've been doing it for years. A lot of these recording artists that started in some of the some of the most, for example, I gotta sneeze. So you think about, for example, Eddie Van Halen was started in Sunset Sound, and then eventually he built 5150 Studios, right? He built his own recording studio. Prince recorded at Sunset Sound before he built his own, which is, Paisley Park up in Minneapolis. I mean, a lot of artists. Whitney Houston built her own recording studio in her home in Jersey, New Jersey. So Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, same thing. They built Flight Time Studios up in Minneapolis. And a lot of these artists were starting to go to, like, a lot of artists were recording out of Prince's studio or Flight Time Studio and so forth. A lot of artists that collaborate with artists, like some of these artists that were collaborating with Whitney Houston, weren't even going to like the Electric Ladies. They were going to her studio, recording studio. She would have her, Whitney Houston would hire, session musicians, and she had her own recording engineer, and we're talking, we're not, they still, even though it's in their home, they got a completely built control room with the live room. It's like a commercial studio, but it's just on the house. And so you're going to get the same results. The same thing with George Duke. George Duke had, was it LeDunk? He was recording all his albums out of his recording studio. So I think it's been like that. A lot of these artists realize, especially when they were, they sign a record deal, and, they get their first advance, $250,000, $500,000 advance, whatever. They realize later on in their careers, I don't have to take no more record label advance money. I don't have to take that no more. I'm making enough money off my touring. I pay back my label. I let them recoup all their, and now I'm just gonna record, my next album. I got my own recording studio. I don't need their budget. That's what was pretty much happening. Let me see. Matthew says, I like recording at home, and also like collaborating with other producers and mixers, so I can do either. I do too. That's why I said, me personally, I do like the vibe of a commercial recording studio, because when you walk in there, For one thing, in a recording studio, whether you do it at home or you go to a commercial studio, it has a familiarity, vibe to it. You like, this feels familiar, just on a bigger scale. What's nice about the commercial studios is they do, a lot of times, the right commercial studio has the room. They have bigger space. Like I said, the only downside to a commercial studio is you are paying on the hour. It's the cost. That's pretty much the only downside to a commercial recording studio. It's the cost, because they are charging by the hour. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to pay $150 an hour. I'm doing 12 hours. So now I'm paying $1,700-$1,800 a day or whatever. And I need to record a studio for 3 weeks. Well, you do the math on that, $150 an hour. And you do that, I don't know, 3 weeks at $1,500 to $1,700 a day. Now we're talking $7,500 to $8,000 a week. Now we're talking, we got up to $24,000 for 3 weeks of recording. And that's really, 3 weeks is actually pretty short for a major album project. Some recording artists have been in the recording studio for months working on their next album. It just depends on the artist. So other than that, let me see, read a few more. This is probably going to be a short live stream today. It is thunder and storming. I don't like trying to do these live streams when it's thundering, because if the power goes out, it cut the live stream short. So, and it's thundering right now, but let me see. I mixed up, says home studio for decades, never look back. Yeah, it's just I've made numerous reasons why. One, the convenience. And I've used my home recording studio as an example. I can be here anytime I want. I don't have to book it. I don't have to worry about, I can come in, when my booking time, let's say some of our recording artists have to wait, like if I book this certain studio, my time may be between 2 p.m. to like 12 p.m. And that's the only time I can be in there. Other than that, they got to wait. They can't be in there except for their book time. And they're paying the hour, $150, $200, $300, $400 an hour, whatever, depends on like if you're a major studio like Blackbird, who's going to record like Mariah Carey, you best believe it's about $500 an hour for Mariah Carey. So, oh yeah, it says as I mentioned, access to gear, dolls. So it's just I've proven it time and time again. You can do this at home and get the same results. Mr. Showtime said, I built a home studio because I can never get a good mix from a big studio. I went to Power Station. They built in Florida. Didn't like, that's really odd. And I wonder they really, because a lot of times you don't have to use their in-house engineer. You can have your own engineer. For example, and the reason why I'm saying that, let's say the engineer, because a good engineer can recognize, let's say it's a 4-piece band or 4-piece band, drums, bass, guitar, vocals, right? Maybe, or, drum, bass, and a couple of guitars. You was like, okay, that's easy breezy. The biggest thing is getting the drum room sound, getting a good bass. Sometimes people would DI the bass, and getting the mic, the drum or the guitar cabinets mic properly, and the room sound. But just because he placed it in a certain part of the room doesn't mean that the drum room sound is going to sound right. You might have to move the drum. So a good engineer would know that. It's like, oh yeah, I can hear that's not going to record well if I placed it. Let's move the drums here, or put it in a smaller, or a drum isolation of the big, instead of the big open area of the live room. Some people just want the big open of a live room because the drums sound bigger from the sound reflections in the room. So they want to get the bigger drum sound, and on top of that, it's sometimes if the mixing engineer, what choice of mics did he use for example, most people get the snare right because most people go with an SM57 microphone, top and bottoms. It's really hard to mess up a snare sound when you're using the SM57 unless you just don't have the preamp set properly. But the kick, toms, overhead mics, and the room mics can matter. Some people like to use a pair of Newman U87s for overheads. Some people like to use a set of maybe a KM84s for overheads. Some people like to use AKG C414s for overheads. And how they're placed over the, how they're spaced and so forth. That can make a difference because the overheads gives the complete picture of the drums, right? Or how the drums sound. That can matter, or the engineer just didn't know how to set the preamps, or just because, let's say they recorded Green Day, doesn't mean if you go in there and record your stuff with your band and he has the same set for Green Day, because they might be using different instruments. They may be using an AC-130 guitar cabinet. You might be using, maybe instead of a Fender cabinet, you might be using for example, a Marshall cabinet. And so a Marshall cabinet probably would sound better with a ribbon microphone on it, maybe a Royal 121 or whatever, instead of using a FET 47 on the guitar cabinet. The engineer has to know all this. But I don't think that necessarily that the big studio, I think that particular situation is because the engineer just didn't get it right. And on top of that, remember, that's just the front end recording side. Then we're talking about the mixing side. Did they use 1176 on your vocals when they should have used maybe the distressor? Maybe they should have used a FMR or whatever. Maybe they should have used an LA2A on vocals or whatever, or maybe they should have parallel compress. All that matters. So I would never say, because you think about the millions of artists that have recorded in these big studios, that have gotten amazing sound and require. So I don't think it was the big studio. I think it was the engineer. They didn't do a good job, which probably, it's almost like it's almost like going to a restaurant and eating some food and not liking the food. And you heard all these great things about this restaurant, and you're like, man, the food was horrible. Not realizing it hasn't really, sometimes it hadn't really nothing to do with the restaurant. It had to do with the cooks. The cooks, they probably didn't, especially if it's a chain restaurant. Just because it's Chili's doesn't mean that the cooks that cook, the food that make food for Chili's in New York doesn't mean that the same cook, they're not the same cooks. They got hired in like Oklahoma City. They're different people. So you can have a bad experience eating at Chili's in Oklahoma City. You're like, well, man, the Chili's in Oklahoma City sucked. But I remember eating Chili's at, New York, and it was amazing. It's because it's different cooks. This is the same thing about engineers and same, just like that. It's the same concept, because you and I know most of these recording studios have the same ubiquitous gear. They're going to have a Neve. It's really hard to mess up the sound on like a vintage Neve, unless that Neve was broken, like a Neve 8038 console, 1081 preamps or the 1073s, the Pultec EQ. If they got all the same ubiquitous gear and you didn't get a good sound, it was the engineer. They kind of screwed you on that one. Okay, so yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So, and the Matthew says, yeah, I've worked with a few producers back in the day that pulled really crappy mixes. That also why I like doing it myself. I work with, sometimes, believe it or not, it's and a lot of times, sometimes it's the wrong engineer. Not that sometimes an engineer is a bad engineer, but if you got an engineer and he knows how to engineer a rock band, but he knows absolutely nothing about hip hop, you got the wrong engineer, because hip hop has a certain sound that makes it sound like hip hop. Same thing with a jazz band. You know, I always said this before. If you know, let's say there's a studio in, for example, I'm going to use MCA Studios in Los Angeles, right? Versus Sunset Sound. Sunset Sound will be a great recording studio for rock bands, right? Or live bands in general, right? Mostly rock bands. But Sunset Sound is not necessarily a great choice for doing like an R&B session. MCA Studios do a lot more R&B artists in MCA Studios in Los Angeles than Sunset Sound. Sunset Sound can do R&B artists, but for one, you know, Sunset Sound, as an example, the console they got in there is basically, it's a Frankenstein version of an API console. It really is. And, you know, sometimes you want to go to a studio that has a little bit smoother R&B sound, that's why we want to go to a Neve, as an example. So they're recording through like a Neve VR88 console. That's going to give you a more of that classic R&B sound, because that makes sense, versus something that's going to be more aggressive sounding like an API, or even something that's even really great for mixing, like an SSL. SSL are really great for mixing. That's, you know, with having dynamics on each channel, compressor gates, and it was the height of. Plus, you know, SSL is known for that, their master bus compressor. So, but an SSL is not. Sometimes, believe it or not, some consoles, SSL, Neve, and API, when really is going to work for you, would be like an MCI console, or even the preamps, microphones, all that matters. So, Andre and Spawn. If I didn't get your knowledge, you guys welcome. I'm just talking about, you know, we're talking about recording and all that. Yeah, Miss Shows, yeah, I agree with this. It's engine, not the, yeah. So a lot of times, sometimes the engineer just don't have the ear for what the client is trying to achieve, you know. So let's see. Andre says, I think sound has changed. What we listened to back in the 80s, not what we're listening to in 2025. Is that why home studios are valid? The talent in home studios are, well, yeah, because you think about it, and that's actually true, because you think about the 80s. What was the 80s? Every genre of music was a band. R&B groups in the 80s, you're talking Midnight Star, you're talking Starpoint, we're talking Cameo, Confunction, or just even R&B artists, if they were, you know, whether it was Luther Vandross or Freddie Jackson, whatever the case, that would hire session musicians. It was still a band. It was still drums. It was still, you know, you would still have bass players like Marcus Miller was hired to play bass, or, you know, Johnny Good, Bass Washington, or these different type of musicians, Nathan East. These musicians were hired. You would have certain keyboard players that were hired, Greg Philliganes, George Duke. You know, they would come in and they would have horn players that would come in, and, you know, certain horn players would be hired to play. You know, Gerald Albright, we hired to play horns on the solo section, but it was bands. 90s started becoming more sequence in the 90s, you know, with more New Jack Swing. You know, you had Teddy Riley, you had all these different producers like that, Jimmy Jam, where they were doing a lot more, even though they still use, you know, real instruments. You start getting into more sequence stuff. And even the rock bands, you know, if you go back to the 80s with the rock bands, you know, you had Twisted Sister, you know, you had Motley Crue, you had Rat, Def Leppard, even with the country and western artists, you know, Alan Jackson back in those days, you had George Strait, you know, they were all bands. But now, you know, you got to start going to 2000s. You know, you look at how powerful synthesizers, and even, you know, look what your if you have keyboards like I do, look how powerful keyboards have gotten. Starting even with the Triton, the Core Triton, to the new Roland Phantom. I got the Phantom EX edition. Look what the my Chronos can do. Look what the Montage can do. All these modern sound, or just on your computer with VST instruments. All these virtual instruments and all these, and the programs are coming with virtual instruments already in it. Like Studio One comes with its own sound, library of VST instruments, from Impact, the drum machine, the Impact drum machine. You just name it, all the stuff you can do with those virtual instruments. Those are all the tools that people are using today. And because a lot of that stuff is really, truly digital, that's why stuff sounds different too. You got a lot more virtual digital sound going on. So, yep, that's the reason why it sounds different than the 80s. It's the same thing. If you go back and listen to people that listen to music from the 40s or the 30s, they were listening to live, big band recordings. Genres of music change too. I think every 10 years, the genres of music really shifts. Even hip hop has shifted from the 80s hip hop to the 90s hip hop to the 2000s hip hop, to modern hip hop today. We're talking 40 years later, and hip hop is completely different now than it is in 80s, 90s. So let me see. Got some more comments coming in. Okay. Oh yeah. Let's see. Oh, sponsors. I got a Triton 65, 32 channel. That's a nice console. That's a really nice console. So John Israel says my SSL6 with my Wormadio G Comp with Acoustica and Nebula has been working great. That's really cool. And then, like I said, between even with what Spawn has and what John has, you can get amazing results if you know what you're doing. A lot of times it doesn't have to be. It's not like it won't work if it's a Triton only. You have to, people been using different types of gear. So let me see. Sponsor, all the new stuff has only 8 bus, which is unless you have a DAW. A DAW, you can make as many bus as you want. You can make as many buses as your processor and computer can handle. Like me, I only have 8 bus. My Allen Heath right here, it's a 48 channel, but it's only 8 bus console. Yeah, it's not like some of these other bigger consoles that 16 or 32, 24, 32 bus. I just don't group a lot of stuff to go into a lot of bus channels, which would be nice, but I just don't. I'm not grouping a lot of everything. I'm just mainly, because most of the stuff I do is I don't really need no more than 24 channels for mostly everything that I do. Our sponsor says the sound of the music is louder. It's not cool. Well, yeah, that's you got to remember, people it's almost like, it's almost got to the point where you got to run limiters because everyone's pushing their stuff hot. I got to the point where I have to turn down the volume on my YouTube channel. I have the volume level really low on my YouTube channel because everything's so loud. So I just got a point at, I don't know why everyone, but it's no different than people listen to car stereos going up and down the road. And I'll be sitting at a traffic light and I have a nice little volume listening to my grooves on my stereo. Next, someone pulled next to me and all I hear is that's all I hear. I'm like, God, dog. But that's what it is. What it is. Our sponsor, and we were just to talk about rock band. Yeah, rock band. Well, yeah, because people say with rock bands, the biggest thing is the guitars, having all the distortion. Like especially with thrash metal. Yeah, that'd be really, really loud, and but I think that's just generational thing. Everyone wants to hear things loud, and then they wonder when they get my age, so they don't think they're hearing is a key thing when you start getting my age. Like, yeah, I don't play things loud. I used to play stuff loud when I was young too, but now I realize I value my hearing, so I don't play things loud. Like even in the recording studio, you're not even supposed to be mixing a recording loud. You're only supposed to have the speakers enough where you can hear, but you're not supposed to, like some people, go some studios and you see those big gigantic Westlake speakers in the wall, or those Osbergers or whatever you see in the wall, and and they have this, they turn the volume, and you're like, God, trying to impress the client. I'm like, I don't need to hear it that loud. I just want to be able to hear, so I can hear the song. I can hear the strings doing this, or the guitar line doing this, or the keys doing this, the vocals sounding here, the movement of the bass or whatever. That's loud enough. That's all. I don't need to have this, but that's just me. So welcome, Warheart Arts. Like I said, I'm just talking about commercial recording studios that were closing. And I think, like I said earlier, honestly, I think for the most part it's simply because the budget isn't there. People, if you think about it, the average budget for a recording artist to do, let's say they've been in a recording studio for 2 months, that would be an easy 50 grand for an artist that spend for 2 months in a recording studio. And maybe another 50 grand because you got to hire all the musicians, the horn players, that's so $100,000. But that was a common thing. Artists have found doing this at home, hiring, or even finding certain musicians / producers that can create the music. Some artists are even just buying tracks, beats and tracks from certain produced creators, music creators. They'll buy tracks and all that. It's a lot of options out there that artists are going. But personally, yeah, I like commercial recording studios, but I haven't been to one in a while, and it's only simply because I really just don't need to go to one. So a Warheart or AI kill beat sellers. Yeah, like I said before, that we were talking about this before, the threat of AI. Which is a threat, because you think about it, it's no different than AI. Is almost like, if you think about when car manufacturers would have nothing but humans building cars. They found out that it was easy to build cars with robotics. So they start replacing people with robotics in the 60s, right? Because a robot don't never get tired. It doesn't need a lunch break. It doesn't need to put in sick leave. A robot doesn't call off for, a robot, whatever the case. Robot just doing its repetition based on how it's programmed to do what it needs to do. So we're talking about this with AI, generated movies, and how AI, you think about it, if you have an AI, you ain't got to worry about hiring stunt doubles and people getting hurt and stuff being destroyed, because AI is fictional. You ain't got to worry about building movie sets. You can, because everything's graphic. People can, whatever case. But and y'all, you probably see, we all see it, with the AI. With sometimes you think it's a real human and it's not. It's an AI. Just like you hear some you can be listening to voices on whatever. Like, I've been trying to find, and now I really believe it's AI. Y'all probably watch a lot of the short videos or the TikTok videos where the guy sound like, and the man was walking down the street. He has that certain tone of voice, and he had, or we're going to show you how to make 3 loaves of bread. He has that certain tone. I think that's an AI. That's not a person doing voiceover. That's an actual AI because it's on everything. I'm like, I hear that same voice on a lot of stuff. How to make 3 people walk. He, it has that tone. I'm like, that's got to be AI. And AI, back in the day, they were trying, back in the day when they were first, doing these voiceovers and, there was AI, it was really obvious because the voice would sound something like, hello, I would like to, and it would have this jumpy sound to the vocals. But now it sounds so humanistic. Even when you're talking to someone, it's kind of like pulling up to like Taco Bell and like, hello, welcome to Taco Bell. Will you be using your mobile app today? That's an AI voice because the real person actually didn't come over the intercom. How can I take your order? That, that's a real person, right? But when you first pull up, it's like, hello, welcome to Taco Bell. Will you be using your mobile app today? And it's always the exact same. If you think about it, and one of the things about AI that's going to kill AI is, you and I, the one thing that makes humans is we are emotional, moody people. We're not always that chipper. When you pull up, it's always the same. Hello, will you be using your mobile app today? It's always the same because that's AI. Versus sometimes, y'all know, yeah, we don't want to pull up and someone have an attitude. Welcome to Taco Bell. Can I take your order? Really? We don't want to hear that, right? Because then you're like, oh, this person got a nasty attitude. I'm like, I didn't tell you to work at Taco Bell anyway. But y'all know what I'm talking about. So, but sometimes you want to hear a little bit of human emotional reaction. It's just it's because we as humans, we are creatures of humans are like any other, like any other primate species of people, like what is social creatures, right? Humans are social creatures. So we like to interact. Like I'm interacting on this live stream, right? We like that interaction. But AI, I don't see how AI can have that emotional interaction, Oh, John wrote something. He said, yeah, most of the 80s groups were bands. It's almost like bands are becoming obsolete from a song writing, producing point. Yeah, because you think about the one thing, what was the one thing that made a band a band? And I'm not talking about because you have a drummer that can play drums, or a guitar player that can play guitar, or a bass player can play bass, or a singer that can sing, keyboard player can play keys or whatever. You know what made that band sound good? Because everyone was using their creative talents to make a song work. The energy from the drummer playing the drums, the bass player vibing because we're social creatures, connecting musically with the drummer, and the guitar player connecting with the band, and the keyboard player connect. Everyone's got this social vibing connection, and that's what makes songs good with bands. And not because you happen to have all the right pieces. And sometimes that's really can be the downfall for even a person like myself who does all the music. Sometimes it takes, I may be thinking of a certain guitar line, right? But a guitar player, and I play guitar, but I'm not a guitar player like I'm not like some of the, a guitar player. A guitar player, you may be sitting there playing this vibe thing. I might be playing some chords on the keyboards or whatever, and I got this thing, and I'm thinking of the guitar line. I might come up with a guitar line and go like a plucking sound, and then but a guitar player say, yeah, that's cool, but I would let me throw, or he may have thought of something else that made the song work. The line that made it work better than what I thought. I'm like, oh, I like that better. That's where you get from human interaction from being in the band. Or I might come up with this drum beat, something like that, right? And the drummer might, yeah, that's cool, but he might do something that that really gives it a little bit more oomph. That can, believe it or not, that could be the make it or break it difference between if people like the song or not. I think that's what makes human band and human interaction and bands so significant. Our sponsor, humanism, is that a word? Well, it is now. I'm gonna use it. Humanism. I'm gonna use it. Warhart R said Ableton is the most people's band now. Well, like that's Ableton's like any other DAW. The DAW is really, believe it or not, it's a tool like any other DAW. It's a tool. Whether you have one person using that tool or one person engineering, but you have multiple people contributing to the use of that tool. But that's like any DAW, really. Oh, sponsor, yep, you're going to play each measure different that sounds more yeah. It's the reason why, and I got a buddy of mine, when he creates music, he sequences everything, but then it's looped. And which is perfectly fine. But when you hear a loop and it's being played over and over, you can hear it's a loop. And you and I, when you think about it, when a live band is playing in concert, they never play it exactly the exact same bars every 8 bars, the exact identical way. They just don't. No human does that. So when you have something that sounds more musically being played that through, so now, like for me, I record everything. If I record a 4-minute song, I play it all the way through 4 minutes to give it a human feel, because that's just, and there's what makes it sound good is because, yeah, it may have a little bit of imperfection, a little bit of off timing, just a hair, but that's how they played. No one played spot on, precisely 122 beats per minute the entire 5 minutes. No one plays like that. It just isn't. So I 100% agree that needs to happen. That needs to be brought back instead of just creating 4-bar or 8-bar loop. If you want it to sound more realistic. So yeah. This is going to be a short session because it's 9:30 and I haven't eaten. So I'm about to get ready to go eat. But I will try to tune in next week. I'm gonna try my last couple of weeks. One, it rained, it was thunderstorming. I just wasn't turning this on because I don't trust when it's thunderstorming. You don't know if the power's gonna go out, but the rain stopped. So that's why I didn't do it last week. But and the week before I wasn't feeling good. So let me see. I got a couple more comments before I end it. Human brain hates perfect entertainment. It's kind of like you think about it when you think about it when you talk to an AI automation system. We've done it, right? We've done this. You could call, let's say you got a problem, a technical problem. And it'll say something like, for English, press 1. Para español, prima uno dos, right? It'll say something like that, right? You boop, okay, here, number 1. Then it'll say, to check your account and balance, press 1. To check your last billing statement, press 2. Blah, 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 blah. If you want to, whatever, and then you notice it never says to talk to someone, press whatever. It just says to repeat, hit the pound button or whatever. Y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. We've all called something in some sort of customer service or whatever we had to call. Who hates doing that? Don't you feel a lot better when you call someone and they pick up the phone and it's actually someone human? Like, Thanks for calling. Thanks for calling Verizon. This is Jim. How can I help you? Oh, how you doing? Because you're so shocked. Oh, it's actually a real person. Hey, Jim, how's it going? My phone hasn't been working in the last 2 weeks or whatever. I'm not getting my text message. Can you looking at? Okay, let me get your account number. You can hear stuff clicking, click, click, click. He's actual. Don't that feel? Doesn't that give you more of a pleasant experience than, you know, they asking you to say something and all of a sudden that's like they get it wrong. So tell me in the AI, like, tell me what technical problems have you been experiencing? Well, my tech isn't working. I'm sorry, I did not get that. Tell me what technical experiences you been experiencing? My text messages have not been working. I'm sorry, I did not get that. Tell me what, really? Don't that, yeah. That's what I don't like about AI. That's why we love about working with talking to actual humans. So War said I just ordered a Tascam Studio Bridge, 24 tracks, dollars. Okay, nice. I'm not really familiar with it, but okay. Spawn says, well, I just think you played like that. Like that would be more. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're talking about if you just try to be where you sequence it, loop it, quantize, and then loop it over and over. It just, I mean, it really, it's kind of like, it's kind of like it doesn't feel, we can sense when we listen to something. We can sense. That's all I can say because I'm losing my train of thought. Sponsor, brother, I have to connect with. It's kind of like one day I'm gonna have to set up a time where I can be in a public space, and a certain location at time where people, and the people can we can meet face to face. One day, like how people meet at NAMM shows. And or things like that. One day I might do it like maybe if I was in Houston, Texas, and I would be at this certain location or whatever, whatever. Who knows? But I guess the way I change my lighting, the camera. Oh yeah, let me see. I guess the way because the camera got a little light. I was looking at the background of the console back here, right here. So, Pedro, how's it going, Mark? I bought a Ramza 820. Thinking about the Soundcraft Ghost. Do you like that mixer? The Ramza 820. I've never touched one, saw one, so I have no thoughts on the Ramza 820 because I've never owned one. I never give an opinion on gear I've never owned or touched. Now, as far as the Soundcraft Ghost, I have a friend that has one. He swears by it. There's a lot of people that have gotten Soundcraft Ghost to swear by them. So, all I can say is they swear by it. So, I think it'll be a good mixer. Like I don't own one, so that's as far as I can comment on it. Oh, he says you're selling your Ramza. Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Like I said, I had a friend that's got one. He loves the Soundcraft Ghost. And I've seen people that swear by him. So all I can say is try it out. And you definitely might like it. I should do a 2025 studio tour update. Even though I really hadn't got much gear, but I probably should do that. So, it says because it's unbalanced. The REMS is unbalanced. Yeah. You definitely want balanced connections. Especially on TRSs and XLR inputs and outputs. You want balance. That does make a difference. So, We are done for the live stream because I am I need to eat dinner. So oh, Bedros, your videos are being so helpful. Thank you. Oh, I appreciate you watching the videos. I really do appreciate y'all watching the videos. I do appreciate everyone watching the videos. So, and I need to start getting back into more recording videos. And I did say I was going to do a music production video. I need to get that. I'm so swamped. I'm so, man, I got so many people trying to pull me to do so many different things, different directions. And then next year, I'm definitely not going to allow people to pull me like they're pulling me this year. I'm gonna lose what hair I'm losing now because I'm older, so my hair is thinning. But that comes with age. But anyhow, I really do appreciate y'all. It is late. I'm starving. So I really appreciate y'all, and hopefully I'll be able to tune in next week, and we'll keep with the live stream as much as possible. I apologize because some people look for these live streams and I don't get a chance to always do them. Is because I've gotten either tired, something happened, busy, or whatever the case. So, but I'm still live. I'm still here. And appreciate everyone. And thanks for everyone for support and watching the videos. And we'll see y'all next week. All right. Y'all have a great one.